Community development and permitting agencies provide critical oversight to support growth and planning, health and safety, and long-term sustainability. Timely permitting workflows, fee collection, and effective communications can make all the difference to the local businesses, contractors, and residents in your community. Keeping pace with demand can feel like an impossible task as agencies struggle with application backlogs, resource constraints, and a lack of transparency, resulting in frustrated customers. Cityworks PLL is the leading GIS-centric solution for community development, permitting, and licensing. Cityworks is designed to help you simplify the permitting and planning process from start to finish. Cityworks PLL is built exclusively on Esri ArcGIS, giving office staff, field crews, and residents access to real-time project data. Configurable templates allow you to easily manage tasks, including permit applications, plan submissions, inspections, code enforcement, utility permitting, regulatory compliance, business licensing, and more. Cityworks eliminates the need for physical paperwork by organizing application, permitting, and licensing workflows in one digital location. An online public portal allows businesses, contractors, and residents to submit applications, schedule inspections, pay fees, and track status updates at their convenience. Mobile tools support your field crews as they perform inspections and code enforcement activities. Dashboards provide analytics and transparency for both internal and external stakeholders, keeping everyone up to date and eliminating information silos. Cityworks PLL works seamlessly with our maintenance management software, enabling staff throughout the organization to easily share information with public works and utility crews, fostering effective communication, seamless workflow handoffs, and informed decision-making to help manage infrastructure throughout the entire asset lifecycle. The results? More transparency, improved efficiency, and satisfied customers, allowing you to get back to what you do best, supporting the growth, health, and safety of your community.
We're going to get started here with the city of Suffolk, and they converted, they've been on-premises hosting for many years, and the city moved to a cloud-based system just recently with both AMS and PLL applications and databases. They moved all of it over to the cloud. So Robert Bradley will discuss the steps needed to successfully relocate Cityworks over to the cloud. And he and Adam Chanel from Wolpert will discuss the plan, approach, and execution, along with the obstacles. It's not always easy to transfer that, to make that move. But they'll talk about those obstacles to successfully move to the cloud. Robert, I will turn the time over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Bradley, and I am the Senior GIS Programmer for the City of Suffolk, which is the largest independent city in the state of Virginia. We have a population reaching upwards of 100,000 as of the last census. We are the fastest growing city in the region, with numerous city assets spread out around 420 square miles. We receive over 10,000 permit requests a year and conduct over 30,000 trade inspections every year. Trying to get this slide to work.
You need to move your mouse. Okay, there you go.
We've seen with this increase, We've been Cityworks users since around 2005 with the AMS system, and we recently, in 2017, launched the PLL side when we needed to replace our permitting software. We have about 300 Cityworks users and growing, spread out across numerous departments, including public works, public utilities, planning and community development, capital programs, and even the assessor's office. If any city that's upgrading or expanding at such a rate, we've come through a lot of challenges that we need to address with our use of Cityworks, including the need to upgrade and expand due to the increased workload, but not having the technology on site to handle that. Availability of external access, as we had been using VPNs, which were very slow, and the idea of externalization of the site was not fully sold on our network team. Next was site availability when experiencing any internal network problems, and also data retention, continuous backup availability is there, and very limited storage and no limits on storage. We also had a problem with not being able to upgrade Cityworks regularly due to limited staff support on site, and we wanted to quickly take advantage of enhanced functionality in any of the new versions that were being presented by Cityworks, including with Respond, mobile, data analytics. Lastly, and most importantly, is that we needed to launch a public portal in order to allow online permit access. This was greatly accelerated by the COVID pandemic. Next, Adam from Woolpert will talk about what steps they and Cityworks were able to do to help us with these challenges.
Thank you, Robert, and good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Chenal. I'm a system analyst with Woolpert who helped out with this project. And so on this slide, we're talking about several different components of the solution, the first being the technology. And so step one was getting Suffolk from version 15.2 to 15.7 so that we can get them up to Cityworks Online. For those of you who may not be aware, Cityworks Online stays on the latest and greatest version, and it doesn't support the prior version. So you can't send them a 15.2 database and say, please host this for me. What you send them needs to be on the latest version and the latest service pack. So the upgrade piece of it was kind of step one. And that carries with it, all the normal upgrade steps, including the data migration tools and things like that. And there were some significant schema changes between 15.2 and 15.7 that had to be accounted for. The second big piece of it is the migration to the cloud. So moving everything to the cloud, not just the database and its configuration, but also the reports and the existing attachments, which for Suffolk, a longtime Cityworks user, it was about 0.5 terabyte worth of attachments that had to get pushed up to the cloud. So these things were, pretty big pieces of it. There was more to it as well. I won't go into detail of every last piece of the project, but it's also worth noting that there were some GIS updates happening concurrently by Suffolk, kind of modernizing its server architecture, as well as the schema for some of its layers and things like that. And the GIS was not being pushed up to the cloud, the Cityworks cloud. So diving in a little bit more about how we accomplish those things, in the process of migrating and upgrading the database, we had to address custom database objects, and Suffolk had quite a few. There was actually about 200 custom database objects. So when I say custom database objects, I mean things like views, functions, stored procedures, triggers, things like that don't exist natively in the Cityworks database. And these had just been accumulated over time. Some of them were no longer needed, but understandably, I think folks have a hesitancy to delete something, with the thought that it might be needed one day in the future. So without a dedicated cleanup task, those custom database objects can grow and grow. And certainly some of them still were needed. But we had to systematically evaluate which functionality needed to persist from those custom objects, and then account for that one way or another, whether that meant moving some SQL logic from the database to a report, or using now inherent Cityworks functionality, because that covered a couple use cases as well. So we had to go through, after we cataloged all the objects, we had to go through and evaluate which ones were still needed, which ones could we drop and leave behind, and which ones would we have to account for the functionality in one way or another. Another big piece of it were the reports, and the city of Suffolk had about 200 reports in their on-premise system. And so what that meant was between data connection type changes between 15.2 and 15.7, schema changes, and the fact that the GIS database and Cityworks database were no longer side by side, there was a fair amount of work to be done on these reports. And so just like with the custom database objects, we made a catalog. I should say the Suffolk DBA made a catalog of all these reports. And then we went through them, we prioritized them. We had a POC for each one that we could reach out to and say, are you still using this? Are any updates needed, things like that? Because again, over the years, some of these reports evolved. Some of these reports were like a version 1 type of report, and there might be a version 2 or version 3, and so no one uses the old ones. So in some cases, we left the report behind and said, this is covered some other way. But for the vast majority of them, we did bring them over to the cloud, and we did have to make some updates, whether large or small. So that was another big piece of the project. And that was certainly a joint effort. You know, whether it was the Suffolk DBA coming up with ideas or Wolpert sharing their experience, we kind of collaborated together and had a divide and conquer approach on getting all those reports updated, because it was a sizable list. Onto the business processes. I think the biggest change for Suffolk was for their IT folks in not having to manage the servers, and as well as hosting the reports in the cloud. I didn't really get into the details of the reports that touched GIS directly, but there were some, we had to account for those as well. And that required them to host a separate Azure GIS database that was externalized, but it only contained a subset of the GIS information required for the reports. So that was one change for them, but also taking things off their plate in terms of maintenance or troubleshooting or things like that. A lot of that was really now in the realm of Cityworks Online. They also have the option for database access, which is read-only, which is a read-only connection to the cloud-hosted database. And they actually did use that because they had a custom-built application that was used to looking at their database. And so instead of pointing to the on-prem one, they decided they would just keep that and point it to the cloud. And so that was another change on the business side of things. As far as people involved, there are a lot of different departments and stakeholders, as Robert mentioned. You know, Cityworks is in widespread use, both AMS and PLL throughout the city. So throughout the project, we were consulting with different SMEs from each business group, as well as Wolpert and Cityworks. So one thing that we did that I thought was very helpful, especially towards the end of the project, the last several months, was have regular check-in meetings with Wolpert, with the city of Suffolk, as well as Cityworks technical staff, just to kind of have a check-in and get together and talk about ideas or any issues, or at the very least, make sure we were all on the same page and everyone had a good comfort level for where we were going, especially in the run-up to go live. So with that, I will turn it back to Robert.
Thank you, Adam. As you can see, this was an all-encompassing project that took a lot on, but it accomplished a lot. Some of the benefits we've already been noticing is an increase in productivity, with city staff able to access Cityworks using any device that they have, including mobile phones and tablets. They also are not having any slowness issues that we previously had with our on-premise hosted solution. And there's not been any limitations when they're not within a city network system, meaning they could be out in the field as long as they have a cell signal, they're able to interact with Cityworks. This is really a big benefit on IT because we're not spending a lot of time on server maintenance and troubleshooting, as Adam mentioned. We've also had an improved website design overall, having to go through all of those reports and the schema changes and redesigning workflows and reports and how they function has been a big help to our staff and be able to get the information they need at their fingertips. The cleaned up schema database schemas have also been a big help when it comes to the upgrade process. Without having to worry about all of these custom configurations and triggers, the upgrade process is very smooth, and we have not had a single problem every time that Cityworks has applied a patch or applied an upgrade. One of the biggest benefits has been the early launch of our public portal site, which is enhanced case management, organization. It's relieved staff of having to notify case status by phone or email. They get a lot of phone calls wanting to know what's going on with their cases. And there's more benefits planned in the future as we expand the use of our online public portal access. Return of investment is something that most organizations do have to factor in. And while it's still early in our process and we can't give you a full report, some of the early stuff that we're seeing is better management of IT staff time, not worrying about on-premise resources running out quicker than we can get them replaced or upgraded, increased field access for our staff using Respond and mobile apps that we can quickly launch and have them working with in the same day, which has resulted in inspection turnaround times and notifications that have made the builders in the area very happy. As with any big project, there's always lessons to be learned. Some of the things that we've certainly gotten from this project is a better understanding of database schema requirements for Cityworks Online and how we needed to plan for those in the very beginning. Evaluating those schema changes between Cityworks revisions, especially considering we were so far behind in an upgrade cycle, is very important. The accessing of new functionality when talking about how we can better help our staff and going over these version changes and going over how their workflows may need to change is also something we needed to address a little quicker into the process. And most importantly is ensuring a fully understanding of the wants and needs of all departments involved. When we work with an enterprise level system, there's a lot of stakeholders. And not all of them are fully on support of a project at the very beginning. But as the slide says, having a top-down buy-in and a bottom-up enthusiasm is the only way to have a successful project. So what's next? Well, we have a lot of continuous improvement going on. We're constantly making on-site improvements as we discover new technology and discover other issues that may arise from the way that our system works. And not having to spend time troubleshooting servers has given us a lot more time to do that. We're also hoping to launch new functionality like map logic and webhooks that we previously could not use before. Our continued rollout of our public portal access is going to allow more permit types to be applied for and give our citizens greater access to our system without having to come down to City Hall. Like I said, we're a big city, so not everybody wants to drive all the way downtown. The use of tools like data analytics is going to help us better understand how our assets are being managed and how our system is being utilized to do that. Community development is already using Respond and mobile apps in the field, which has been a big help. And now we have other departments like Public Works and Public Utilities wanting to come on board with those apps too. We are also working on a redesign of our capital programs Cityworks environment to make it easier for them to capture their assets, and then using tools like Cityworks Mobile and ArcGIS Collector. Our future plans also include a readdress of our water treatment plant use of Cityworks with the use of the mobile app Respond and the mobile apps to give them easier access to the Cityworks environment, and even the possible integration of 3D GIS in the future. Thank you guys very much.
For the past several years, we've been focused on making major functionality enhancements within Cityworks. And they expressed some of that today and just, upgrading to 15.7. But so we thought it would be valuable. So a lot has changed over the last year and last few years. And we thought it would be valuable to bring in our subject matter experts to talk about those changes and see them in action as well with our recent launch of 15.8. I want to introduce Dinora Sanchez, our AMS subject matter expert, who will be our guest host for the remainder of the summit to talk about some of these enhancements. She and the team will be giving us an overview of the latest work that has been done and also future priorities that we have out there to keep the product fresh and new and doing what you needed to do out in the field and on your teams. This is meant to be an interactive conversation, so please include your questions again in the chat box. We appreciate those so far. And Dinora, thanks for joining. I will let you take it from here.
Great, thanks, Jed. Appreciate it. All right, good morning, afternoon, and evening to all the Cityworks community. It's always a pleasure to have the community together to really come together and share their experiences and how Cityworks enables that. So really, really appreciate carving out a little bit of time today. So, and one way we strive to really contribute to, how you're doing your work, your operations, is through these releases. And recently we did have a 15.8 release. That release included updates to what most of you are familiar with, most importantly, our platform, also Respond, Style, Admin, Storeroom, Public Access, and the native apps. And I know I pronounced Style pretty funny, so pardon me, I'm from Texas. All right, so that was exciting. Just recently, those releases went out. And just as a reminder, the Cityworks platform really consists of the AMS and PLL components. And so there's various ways that within those you can carry out your operations, your workflows, and whether it be through Office, Respond, or the native apps, you get to choose how you consume those, right? So, but to recall, in recent years, more emphasis has been placed on the platform. And so with new capabilities presented primarily in the HTML5 apps. And so those apps, as a refresher, are here on this slide. And for example, you can dive into Style if you want to use to customize the apps or the look of the different apps, right? But you can also say, well, if I need a certain subset of my field text or my users to only view a set number of fields, which previously in Office, you'd have to go in through the XML. Now that can be done through Style. Very easy, very simple, right? And so that's one way that can be consumed, but maybe you're taking a look at Admin. And so I will say Admin has many enhancements that Designer previously did not. We're continuing to do that, but also know that the goal of Admin is really to become the AMS and PLL admin central config, right? And that's where you're going to go if you have both sides of the platform or both components of the platform. You're going to be able to go in there and really configure what is needed, whether it's at the template level, whether it's setting up your plugins, really a way to do that in a more effective manner. And so just wanted to once again show you how those different offerings have really come about. We have the native apps there. Storeroom is one of those first apps that many experience, as there was a way to do that in Office, and then the app came along. So let's see here. There we go. Okay, so let's cover the Cityworks roadmap. So what does this really mean? As I mentioned, we just had that 15.8 release. So if we start here on the right-hand side of this slide, you're going to see the different releases that are available. So we have everything from 15.8 to the service packs that are in the 15.7 line. So 15.7.5, 15.6.6. And one of the nice parts is now the ability to support ArcGIS 10.9.1 for all those who are on the latest Esri platform. So part of those releases, as I mentioned, were part of what we put out just recently. But there are others that have also, the most recent release is still from last fall. So just wanted to call those out there for some of those, like workload, operational insights, and OpEx. And so some of these, for example, the guys will take you through in the coming minutes here as to some of the great enhancements that you were asking for, and so you'll get to see what those mean. But as we go through the rest of the roadmap here, so some of the things that we're really excited about, especially that came with 15.8, was the ability to provide new services for areas that previously were lacking some services, such as, so once again, in that investment of our platform. So that is, for example, our projects, being able to have APIs to link up to there. From a storeroom perspective, you're going to see what Brad shows you in terms of serialization. And then on things that are still in the pipeline and we're working on, so such as being able to do some tracing with the utility network. That's some of the utility network is something that you'll hear more about if you haven't already, but some of the things that are being worked on. That tracing widget, I know so many people have been waiting for that, have been asking for that for a while, and so that's currently being worked on, being able to really provide a guided access to public access that is something that I know, especially during the pandemic, so many found useful to be able to continue our operations in a virtual setting and remotely, still having a way to consume those submittals. And so really having a way to streamline that process through that guided access, so that your whoever's submitting those really knows what they have to provide. And then there's other things, such as something that we're really excited about is, how do we start getting more of that calendar-based reporting through workload? Some of, how you make your assignments with that calendar view. And so I know that's quite excitement within our group. But at the same time, making sure that cybersecurity, just look at the global events of, any cyber attacks that are being impacted to communities specifically, making sure that we're staying on top and cutting edge there. So this is just a snapshot of what is currently on our roadmap. But really what that comes down to, and what those priorities boil down to, are these items here. And so I'm going to hop around from some of these. I want to start out with GIS, right? So our commitment to being the GIS-centric solution, the premier one, will always be top priority, right? We're always going to have our commitment in that, and that is evident in the 15.8 release. So that was the 3D capabilities, the additional map tools, and the support for the utility network, right? And so that's always going to be what we are anchored in, and making sure that we're always expanding those capabilities and working in tandem with Esri. So these next two priorities, I'm going to skip over core here for a second, but the next two is really, I know it says office gap and designer gaps, right? But I want you to think about these as two priorities that are really important to supporting your workflows in the HTML apps. And that means really, it's not an office gap, it's a respond gap. And I think if you looked at respond and maybe you dipped your toe in and then said, wait, but I can't do certain, I can't carry out my entire workflow and respond because this feature is missing. We know there are gaps in respond. We know there are gaps in admin, right? As I mentioned previously, we have 2 iterations of admin, and we're starting to provide more and more of those AMS or designer and PLL admin pages in admin. But like I said, the whole goal is to make that central configuration location, regardless of what side of the platform you have, right? Or if you have both. And so the idea is that we need to provide you a way to either work just in admin, or if you, rather than going back and forth between designer and admin, right? And so the intent there is a lot of intent and effort going into how we close those gaps. And I say that because we're depending on a lot of usability studies. If you haven't heard about the usability studies, definitely reach out to your CSM, because that is really one way that we are asking for your feedback. We do this at the client level, we do this at the partner level, and that is how, in addition to the ideas that are out there, but also these usability studies, stakeholder groups, that feedback is what's going to make the product better, right? And how we design it in those early stages with your feedback is very critical, and that's where we're really relying on those studies and your feedback as we go through it, through our beta program also, right? That's very important, and that's something we want to keep at as an input and a way to inform and guide us. And most importantly, I think many people might not think about it, but really the core platform and investing in that is very similar to, of course, I'm going to be biased on the AMS side, but it is Public Works Week. And I also want to point out that, infrastructure is very important. And when I think about the investment that has to be made in our infrastructure on a national, on a global stage, I also think about that now as we talk about Cityworks and making sure that we're investing into our core platform and staying cutting edge at the highest industry standards that we can, right? And that means expanding capabilities, whether it's continuing to invest in expanding our services, right? So that if that enables more integration in the future, that is possible, but also making sure that any previous work that's been done into it, so if there's any ways to enhance performance or loading speeds, that we're also doing that. And so as part of that, really investing in core is going to be critical. And that is where we want to make sure that the investment is being done at the platform level, so that can enable AMS, PLL, and all the HTML apps that are part of that, right? And that we're feeding, and that is being used at the native apps level too. So when people are out in the field, that they can easily retrieve their activities and carry out their work to provide the services that at the end of the day, each of us are tasked with from a public level, right? So with that, I want to transition over to the rest of the presentation. So right off the bat, James Oliphant's going to kick us off. And it's really great that we're talking about core platform, because James is actually going to lead us into some of the discussion, some of the industry insights that are really occurring. So I'll turn it over to James Oliphant at this point.
My name's James, and I've been with Cityworks for about 18 years now. And it's probably because I've been here this long, I've seen a lot of changes that they've asked me to talk a little bit about how technology changes over time and maybe how it's impacted Cityworks. And so I wanted to start off by reviewing an article that was written in 2011, a Cityworks magazine article specifically on development, said that while it's very difficult to conceive of the future of technology, we remain, meaning Cityworks, committed to keeping our research and development up to the current standards. And then in 2016, McKinsey Digital, another consulting company, published Modernizing IT for a Digital Era, in which they state that most companies face critical IT modernization issues relating to software, hardware, and cloud-based computing. And we've just heard a couple presentations about how cities have these needs and how they've been working to overcome them. Technology changes rapidly, and we need to be able to understand these changes and modernize our approach and our offering to make sure that we're providing the best tools for today's critical workflows. So there are two main approaches when we talk about modernization. The first one is incremental. This is talking about the pain points, the things that we need to fix right now. How fast can we get this out? And it's usually the limitation is that it's right now. We're not worried about a long-term approach. We just want to fix the issue right now. The second category is end-to-end change, and this usually mirrors technology trends. It usually analyzes the entire picture. It asks, is there a better way? Suffolk, Virginia just went through this process where they reviewed all of their reports and their database configuration to see, is it needed? Can we continue, or can we drop the issue? It requires assessing the upfront costs, the allocation of finite resources, and most importantly, it relies on the new ideas. It should not be limited by the current way we do things, but new ideas can be risky and they can be hard, but the flip side is that they can give us great rewards. So I want to go through a few examples of some clients or some businesses that are important to Cityworks and how they've modernized their tools as technology has changed. So the first thing is Esri. We are definitely side by side with Esri. In 1999, Esri introduced ArcMap 8.0, and that was their first introduction to combine the powerful ArcInfo tools with the user experience that was available in ArcView 3X. And then in January of 2015, Esri released the first ArcGIS Pro version 1. This was their next generation software that was 64-bit. It introduced the ability to work with 3D imagery to manage their new utility network. And then just a few days ago in a May 11th blog post, they are prepping for the upcoming release of 3.0. And in this one, they're specifically calling out some of the breaking changes that they've had to make in order to take advantage of new technology that Microsoft is providing. Moving down the list here, Esri also allows their users to create tools and checks by providing their own SDKs to extend their platform. ArcObjects was the to ArcMap as ArcGIS Enterprise SDK is to ArcGIS Pro. The new SDK is for the new technology. They also have a browser-based setup where the ArcView or ArcGIS 3x JavaScript SDK has been rewritten into the ArcGIS 4x SDK, and the actual change requires quite a bit of understanding of new understanding. And in fact, in their developer site, they say that you should consider rewriting your applications when you're migrating from 3x to 4x instead of just trying to update them. So sometimes this end-to-end change is quite literally means some rewrite of code. The next company is Microsoft. They're always continuing to innovate. In 2002, they introduced this concept called the .NET Framework. And the .NET Framework was a way to consolidate and make consumables in various developer languages on the Windows operating system. In 2019, though, they released the last version of the .NET Framework, version 4.8. And why did they say that this was their last version? Well, in 2014, they also started a new initiative that they called .NET Core. You can see here in the graphic that the blue .NET Framework and .NET Core are independent of each other. They do have a common base that they call the BCL, the Base Common Library. But the .NET Core approach is a new approach. They had, from my research, they have 3 goals with .NET Core. They want to be transparent with the way it works, so they made it open source. They want to be cross-platform, so they've designed it to run on Windows, Linux, Mac OS. They also want it to be performant. .NET 6, which was previously the .NET Core, was released in November of 2021. So they have been very aggressive in their migration to this new .NET Core language initiative. As far as being open source, .NET Core, it has been one of the top 30 most active projects in the open source ecosystem. It has accepted over 100,000 contributions from developers from over 3,700 companies outside of Microsoft. I don't know any company that would be able to actually source or pay for that amount of contribution out of their own pocket. But by making it open source, they can take advantage of the open source community, and everybody can look at their pain points and update the system to help them. Stephen Taub, a partner software engineer for .NET at Microsoft, said that there have been thousands of pull requests into .NET over the last several years to improve performance. And although many of the changes on their own have profound and very measurable impact, a fair number of the changes are what we lovingly refer to as peanut butter, meaning a thin layer of tiny performance impacting changes that individually aren't hugely meaningful, but that over time add up to a bigger impact. So I want to go through a few of these impacts that Stephen had talked about and how those little small changes build up to huge gains over time. So just as a review, .NET 4.8 is the last version of Microsoft in the framework world, and they've just released the .NET 6 in November. All right, Paige, I did it again. Thank you. So in .NET 6, there's a few functions that I wanted to call out just to showcase the improvements that have been made. The first one is just getting the universal time stamp. In the .NET Framework world, you can see that it takes 52 nanoseconds to request the UTC time. And in .NET 6, that same call takes about 20 nanoseconds. This is something that Cityworks does all the time. When we're working with GIS data, we like to utilize the UTC timestamp. to convert things back and forth. So this is something that we want to be aware of. In another function that we do a lot of is joining strings together. We've alphabetized them. We want to put them into a single list. We want to do string manipulation, and in the .NET framework, the string.join function takes about 124 nanoseconds. In .NET 6, it takes 51 nanoseconds. And then the last one that I want to highlight here is that in the .NET framework, when we're working with GUID values, we're turning them from strings into a GUID object. That takes about 250 nanoseconds in framework 4.8. In .NET 6, it takes 33 nanoseconds. Now, measuring things in nanoseconds is pretty hard to conceptualize why that's important, or how much of a benefit that gets us. So I want to go to a benchmark that is published by techempower.com to kind of highlight ASP.NET Core, which is the new ASP platform built in the .NET Core environment. And you take all of those bundles of improvements together, and you can see that in this graphic, what we're seeing here is an ASP.NET server running in .NET Framework can process about 1.4 million hello world, very simple responses per second, 1.4 million per second, but the same test running on an ASP core machine can process over 7 million of those same responses. So Cityworks does have a much more complicated response than just a simple hello world, but the ability to process, what is that, almost 80 times more is huge. And so you can see these gains that Microsoft has put in just by small little incremental changes over the entire code set. This has also affected another one of our big partners, is Oracle. We support the Microsoft database. We also support this Oracle database, and we utilize a product from the Oracle .NET team called the Oracle Data Access Provider. This is something that Oracle allows us to have, provides for developers to connect to the Oracle database without requiring the Oracle client software installed. And so the Oracle.NET team has said that they are going to consolidate their .NET framework development and focus more on their .NET Core development. They've said that by decreasing Oracle's investment in .NET Framework, Oracle will enhance its focus in .NET and future runtime releases. And they even plan to match their ODP.NET, that's their Oracle.NET provider release cycle, with the Microsoft.NET release cadence. Microsoft has said they're going to release a new version of .NET, a major version release every November. And so Oracle is, the .NET team at Oracle is adjusting their release cycle to be every November, every December. And you can see that in December of 2021, they've just announced their support for the .NET 6 version that Microsoft just released. So these are just a few of the technologies that Cityworks is aware of, and we watch and we want to see as they evolve. We want to evolve Cityworks. In 1996, Cityworks introduced our desktop product. Some of you may not even be aware of what desktop looked like. This is an old work order form. It utilized a direct connection using our GIS-STE to the geodatabase. In 2006, we introduced our web-based platform with AMS, followed closely by PLL. In 2010, Cityworks became an Esri Platinum partner. This gave us additional alignment information, and it provided us with constant updates and insights into the new development of Esri with their developers. And then utilizing some published Esri feature JSON information, in 2013, Cityworks produced the first concept of EURL. If you're not familiar with EURL, it's a way that we can share Cityworks data directly into the ArcGIS web map, into the ArcGIS ecosystem. You can put it in ArcGIS Insights, dashboards. It makes it very easy to share the Cityworks data. Then in 2016, Cityworks introduced the first iteration of Respond, that interactive user app that's designed for the ever-changing landscape of tablets and mobile devices. If we go back then to that 2011 article, the Cityworks magazine said, "We remain fully committed to keeping our research and development up to the current standards." This is what Cityworks is doing. We are watching the landscape as it changes, and we are adjusting, we're evolving so that we can provide the best opportunity for you to make those critical decisions that you need to make every day. Thank you very much.
We're gonna shift gears a little bit, and we're gonna start highlighting some of Storeroom's latest capabilities and also future items that are in the pipeline. So I'll turn it over to Brad Johnson, our subject matter expert.
Thank you, Denora. Yeah, great to be with you guys and everybody today. This is pretty exciting, and very excited to show a couple of the current enhancements that are in Storeroom 2.3, but also our roadmap and future functionality for specifically serial numbers in phase 2. And again, shout outs to our development team, and a lot of this it is taking place and getting done, and trying to respond to your requests and the things that you are asking for. So one of the first things I want to talk about and briefly show is the UI enhancement that we've made in Cityworks for material config. And there's been a lot of enhancements, but if you remember, to do material, you had to go to 3 different places. You had to go to the material config, the storeroom material, and the supplier page. Now we've consolidated this into one page. This has been an idea that has been out there from our clients for a long time, and I can see my material. I can see my storeroom material and the material in storeroom, and the same with suppliers, all on one page now. This also makes it so that I can interact with these things. So if I wanted to add a lot of material at one time to a storeroom or a supplier, I can do that all at one time by assigning it now to a supplier. Also, one of the things that we've added is the ability to clone now. So I'm going to look up a water meter, and we're going to be using meters today for a number of our examples, but I can clone this, so I need to select it. And I can clone this now. So if I'm routinely using material to create other material or would like to, now I can do that. And I can assign the storerooms and the suppliers, or I can simply tell it to respect the relationships that are already created for that material. So again, some significant improvements with our UI and others, but specifically with managing our materials and the material configs. Now I want to get into serial numbers and really start to get into this. And I still got to change my page here. There we go. So we're going to talk now about how Storeroom can manage your serial numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and get the ball rolling here as we show what we have called phase 1, and this is actual functionality in Storeroom 2.3. And I have created a dashboard to kind of show this. So this is a dashboard showing material that's serialized in my database. And I can do this through the material config. So I'm going to go to my material config. I'm going to look up my meter, and I'm going to select that. Now here I can look at my details on this, and you can see in the middle here, we've got is serialized. We're going to look at right now the first part of this, which is converting material that's already in my storeroom. And down here at the bottom under the stock on hand, I can see that I've got 3 storerooms with these meters in them, and there's 5 in each one. So again, this is the conversion process. So when I tell Storeroom that I'm making this material serialized, Storeroom's going to want to have serial numbers for these 15 items. So here it shows me the 5. My modal shows me the 5 in each storeroom. And then I have several different ways to get this in. The first way is to enter this manually. So not only can we capture serial numbers, but also warranty dates now and expiration dates. And I can use barcoding to do this as well. I can see my different storerooms. But I really want to show you the new feature we've got, which is I can upload a CSV file with all of this data. So we have a template that's provided. You download it one time, and then you can use this template now, an Excel template that you can fill out, and this can be uploaded. Many vendors actually will provide for you a CSV file or a list of barcodes for the serial numbers that are in a receipt that you might get. So once I filled out that spreadsheet, I can go find that or access that. And now instead of having to manually enter everything in, hopefully I can map this. And here's my template that I downloaded. And as you can see, everything is filled right from that CSV file. So I can go to all of my different storerooms and see the serial numbers being assigned to those storerooms. And then when I hit done, that has converted that material now to serial numbers, and it's added those. So you can see now here I have a new item in my dashboard. I can open this up and see each storeroom. I can see the 15 items in here with their related serial numbers, expiration dates, and warranty dates. So that's the conversion process. That's the first step. Now, if you obviously don't have any stock on hand for something, it's not going to ask you to enter in serial numbers. So when that material now starts to come in and it's going to be received, go to my receive function, select my item, and we're going to receive 5 of these. And I can fill this out just like I would any other receipt transaction, use accounts if I want, comments, and so forth. But I'm going to go ahead and add this 5 items, and I will get that modal again. And it's telling me now, okay, you're receiving 5 items. I need serial numbers for these. Again, I can use my CSV, and there's a different template for that. So there's 2 templates. You can download that. I'm going to actually do it manually this time. So I'm going to put in, there's warranty dates on this, may not be expiration dates, but these are all things you can capture now. And I can manually enter in these serial numbers. I can just type it in and hit enter, and it'll start adding these. I have a ticker up here at the top that counts them, so I know where I'm at. I can use the barcode capabilities there, you can see in the bar. So once these are all entered in, I'm ready to then receive this. I hit done and verify it. Remember, you always verify everything before we commit anything. It's completed. That's been received now. So now if I go back to my dashboard, I can see now I've got 20 on hand. So I've got the original 15 from converting it, plus the 5 additional ones that I've received now. So this is big. This is giving us the ability to manage serial numbers, warranty dates, expiration dates, and so forth. Now I can even put those serial numbers onto a work order. So we're going to issue these 5 of those to a work order, and I'm going to go ahead and type in my serial numbers. I'm going to type in my work order ID, get a verification that I got a valid work order. We're going to add 5. So it's going to give me a list, 5 at a time, and I can see I've got 10 total, because in our main storeroom we had 10. We haven't assigned any yet. So I can assign these by just selecting them and then hitting the plus, and it will add those to my list. And those are the serial numbers that'll be issued. Or I can use this autofill. So I can very quickly simply scan, hit the autofill, and it'll populate that. Verify everything is correct, commit that, And now we've created that issue to that work order of those serialized items. So as I indicated, this is phase one. Phase two takes this really to another level. And what I really want to show and explain in phase two is we've got it in Storeroom, and that's great. But we really want that to be available in the GIS so that when it is issued to the work order, it's ready to be added now to the work order, and to be able to use equipment changeout, for example, to be able to add this material. So what I've got in this dashboard now is showing my serial numbers up here at the top. And this is a development database. So this is going to look a little different as we've got some different information here. Hang on, trying to hit the play button. There we go. Okay. So at the top, as I indicated, I've got a dashboard showing my serial numbers. At the bottom, I've added a dashboard that is a GIS search or query showing the serial numbers and the object ideas of items that have been added to the GIS database. And we're going to work with this meter right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this selected and add and receive in 5 of these. And as I receive those 5, it will add them to my material. So how do I set this up? Again, we go back into Storeroom. We set up that it is serialized material. Now, again, I'm going to show a mock-up here because this is future functionality. You'll have an additional checkbox here to set it to default to add it to the GIS. And the reason that is you may manage material that you want to track the warranty dates and serial numbers and so forth. You may not want to update the GIS or have it in the GIS. So this will be a box that you can check as default. But once this box is checked as is serialized, now I can map this to the GIS. So I'm going to go to Admin. I'm going to go to my GIS fields. And when I do, now one of those new fields is the serialized material. And it will list those materials. So this meter, now I can map it. So I select the asset group, the asset type, which in this case is water meters. And now I can map any fields from Storeroom to the GIS. So things like the description of the meter, the manufacturer, the model, the serial number, expiration, warranty, all of that can be added now and mapped so that when this gets received, it will add all of those fields to the GIS. So now I'm going to go ahead and receive some of these in. So go ahead and select my item again. I'm going to receive 5 of these, add it to the list. Okay, we're receiving it. So we need to have those serial numbers in here. So I'll go ahead and put some information in here that will pertain to this, and then put in my serial numbers. Now, if you'll notice, while I'm putting in the serial numbers, to the right of that, there's a GIS and an update GIS box. This will be checked by default as I check it in the configuration. Then when I come here, this will be checked by default. But this is a second option for me to confirm that I want to update the GIS, or no, I don't want to update the GIS. So in this case, we absolutely do. We want those meters to be in the GIS table. So now I've got all of them in here. I'm going to do my verification that I've got the right items, I've got the right quantity. I'm going to commit this. And when I do, I'll get my confirmation. And now when we go back to our dashboard, we can see there are 5 new meters in our GIS table. And those are ready now to be issued to a work order and assigned to an asset. So let me show you real briefly here how that can be done. So I'm going to go over to respond. I've got my map open. I'm going to go ahead and select one of my meters, and let's create a work order. And my information all fills in. We're going to do a replacement. So going to go ahead and create this. So we've got a work order now to replace that water meter. Close my map. I'm going to select my feature over here, and using my equipment changeout, I'm now going to select that feature. It's going to list that object of the old meter that we're going to replace. So all I do is hit replace, and now that meter that we want to replace that with is already in the GIS. It got there when we received it. So I can hit the add new child or the replace child, and I can type in the object ID here and then verify it. I'm going to use my search capability to find one of those meters. So I'm going to type in my, whoops, got that wrong. What was that? 566. So type in my object ID and then it filters down. There are those 5 that we just added. So I'm going to save this, and that meter now has been replaced with the one that we received just a couple of minutes ago. Now I can edit my GIS and add any additional information I want in here, put it in service, and fill out any of the other fields that I need to on this. So again, this is really exciting for us to be able to provide this. We've been asked for a long time to when are we going to be able to manage serial numbers, and we can now.
And now we're going to turn it over to Anthony Brown. And I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with Anthony Brown. He's one of our newest team members, and he's responsible for the mobile platform. And he's one of our new subject matter experts. So Anthony, we look forward to hearing about all the great things that the native apps have in the most recent release. Thank you.
Here's a brief overview of some items that I'm going to go through. Some user display, legend enhancements. Going back to the theme, you're going to hear a lot of common sense navigation, user experience of long lists, filtering that I'm sure many partners on the call here and field users have lamented maybe for a while when dealing with large lists, and units accomplished and inspection improvements. And I want to stress that we're getting to the point now where we're starting to be able to incorporate certain enhancements, not only bug fixes, into mobile service packs for version 11. So this won't be the end of the road, nor will I be presenting every single enhancement just due to time constraints. Okay, so the first, who am I logged in as? I don't know how many times as a partner I did end user training for mobile, and we had 30 tablets, phones, and they would get up for break, right? Go to lunch, just like we did here, wash their hands, come back, and people talk and devices get juggled around the room, and they log in and realize, what am I looking at? You know, my display doesn't look anything like this. So we just wanted to add something simple to show who you're logged in as. So on your home menu for Cityworks now, you can always see who the active user that you're logged in as is. Moving on, more common sense stuff, and this may border a little above common sense, but still a nice feature, ease of use feature, is when you open your legend from the map. It used to be pre version 11, 15.8, right? that you could only toggle visible layers, but not selectable layers all at once, on or off. Now we went ahead and added both. So I can toggle, as you can see over here, both visible and selectable. So I can clear everything out, right? And then I can just pick the asset, whether it's a hydrant or a meter that I'm out there to go ahead and go work on. I just think that's easy. You know, low-hanging fruit for anybody to just be able to do that. Inspections. So in AMS inspections, I know we've all asked this question. Why is the panel named panel? When I click on one of the left panels, as you can see over here, we've got our different panel names. I would click on one of these and it would say panel instead of what I clicked on fire hydrant status. Now it says fire hydrant status, right? Which is what I would want to see, because otherwise I might get lost in the field with everything going else. You know, with everything else going on, driving around, stop to stop, right? It's nice to see the panel you're on. So common sense enhancement. Following along with the AMS strategies, description. So this was a fairly newer field for AMS inspections. And what it basically is a little more text about what the question's asking. So length of break, feet. Yeah, that's okay. But in some cases, you might have a user or a new user, somebody training perhaps, or your text fields are too long, right, to display well or legibly even on a mobile device. So we added a description field this time around to be able to employ to add extra detail to what is being asked of the inspector. We also added, this is one that's been out there for a little while, as I saw, just being able to sign, right? A lot of people want to have a record. For some of these things are very expensive, you know, and have a lot of repercussions. When we start to talk about consent decree, SSO inspections, right? It's important to capture these signatures and be able to attach them and have them time and date stamped. And now that's what we've done for these inspections, as we can see. Not saying the signatures will always be legible. Okay, a lot of stuff going on here for something very simple with the slides. Sorry. But I just think that it's going to have so many positive impacts once people get used to it. So units accomplished. Boy, it has been out there for a long time too. And it's something that has been asked for in the mobile UI. How many and how many of what, right? Whether it's acres, counts, pots and pans, clap your hands, right? It's finally here. And so you can see the units accomplished field right here. And we can see that we've entered a count of 2. We selected count if it's not locked already. If it is locked in designer or in admin, it will be pre-chosen. In the work order, we can see how that translates in the mobile user interface. And what this is going to play into in our next slide here is consistency in reporting, right? And I'll explain that a little more now. So previously, how did we record counts of things if we used the mobile app? Well, really, your only choice was to put them in a custom field category, while other users may have been using units accomplished for exactly the same purpose, right? So we might be counting, you know, how many fire hydrants we painted in custom fields and in units accomplished in different parts of the software. And I don't think that's good for anybody, especially not reporting accuracy. When you're starting to have to go through, anybody that knows reporting, custom field categories can be a little tricky. And you're joining them with units accomplished. Well, now you can start using units accomplished and mobile at version 11. So I'm glad to get that one up. Another common sense enhancement, adding costs. I have to scroll through what just to find my pipe, length of pipe. I have to scroll through 563 items. We've had, this was one of my big things too on the partner side before I came here. And this is why I was excited to step on board, one of the many reasons. But opportunities like this just to improve the software from a user perspective and seeing what users go through in the field. If you have a client that doesn't have a huge storeroom staff, they're not going to have trucks down to 30, per storeroom and keep them accurately in inventory and checked and configured. It's not realistic, right? Economically, especially right now. So we wanted to do something about this just to ease the burden on the mobile user. So in any of these fields, equipment, labor, material, we can go right here and there'll be a little video of this. I can type or talk if I have dictation enabled on Android or iOS devices. I guess Google Speak on Google. But I would be mad if I had to scroll through 900 items or 563 or even more than 30 to find what I'm looking for, or sad. But we wanted to change that arrow back to the other side of that mood spectrum we're showing. So it's not quite an asset analysis, but more of a usability and mood analysis that we're trying to solve here. And here's just a quick demo. I'm going to zip through this. This is why I didn't do the whole thing in video, the screen size, but I clicked on material, add, and I'm going to look at this field here under the search, and I can see I have a big storeroom or a big list in Cruise, right? And I'll start looking for my iron pipe. I just added 400 items to that storeroom, and that's how long it took for me to filter it. So no more scrolling. That is the goal. I'm going to try to go to the next slide. There we go. So this filtering, keyword searching, dictation, it all comes down to filtering, really. Here's where it's available now, pretty much everywhere on the AMS side. We're looking into adding this in other areas, along with adding the barcoding feature, the scanning feature, right? That's inherent to most modern mobile devices, to utilize that too. Kind of plays into what Brad presented earlier, which was great. So we want to make this the full spectrum, in other words, whether it's coming from a crew or storeroom, serialized, we're going to try to make it work all together. That's the goal. We're getting, but this was the first step, and it's already going to help users cut down on their time and frustration with using the mobile app a lot. So like I said, with feature enhancements, we're not just going to we're going to attempt to not do these at just the major version level anymore. We'd like to be progressive enough to where we can squeeze in, and we already have been working on 11.1, where we've already squeezed in some enhancements there. Some of them, are cases that are, it's like, yes, this makes sense and we can do this and it doesn't affect anything else with the API schema. It's there, no reason not to do it, right? All they have to do is upgrade. So predefined instructions. Everybody knows on the mobile tablet, a lot of people, the instructions display because that's what they're supposed to do. If there's an SOP, it's going to display instructions, but we don't want people trying to type in there on mobile because they're not in the office or supervisors are telling people what to do. So that label's just changing to predefined so you don't get people trying to type in there. Comments are service request caller information is going to be added right now to the main request user interface so they can reference if a caller that they're at their parcel or house requested a callback, right? So they can kind of kill two birds with one stone, for lack of a better term. But common sense enhancements like that, that's what we want to do for our end users. So I think that is pretty much all I have.
Now we're going to learn another way that Cityworks Respond is also extensible. And so Dan Perling has been leading this effort and he's going to take us through that.
To get started here, just to jump right into some of why we created the extensibility model, we had a lot of our customers report that they were really dependent on integrations to third-party applications for their workflows within Office, whether that's launching into a document management solution or into an extension of their asset management within Respond. Or the early release, I should say, you weren't able to kind of do that and complete that solution. So a lot of folks were staying back and using Office. And so the challenge and opportunity here was to create a similar customization option for our HTML5 apps that does everything that the JavaScript injection and XML customizations could do within Office, but also extend that to be able to do more stuff and, really importantly, close up some security problems that exist when using JavaScript injection and some of those other customization options for Office. And so really the solution, which we're going to jump in here and take a look at a demo, is our extensibility model. And the demo is going to kind of walk through how you access the extensibility model. It's accessed through style, and you have a widget configuration screen that we'll take a look at. And then we're going to take a look at two different examples of things you can do within the extensibility model to really kind of solve that problem of extensibility. So here's a video here. I'm going to go ahead and play this while I talk to it. And so this was done by one of our programmers, Zach, who did a really tremendous job. And I kind of cut this up a little bit to fit in within the time constraints, but the full video and some documentation is available on mycityworks.com. So here we're starting in Cityworks style. We have our plugin selected of Respond, and when we go ahead and add a widget, you'll see that the link widget button shows up there within our controls. Now, this gives us a lot of flexibility to drag and drop this widget, whether that be a button, a link, whatever we end up coding, within wherever on that panel that we want it to display within the application. So Zach went in and you can either click the configuration or the configure widget button there at the bottom of the page, or you can double click on the widget within the controls section to open up that widget configuration page. Now Zach here is kind of explaining that the extensibility model is specific to each plugin. And right now this is available in Respond, but we're hoping to add this to all of our HTML5 apps, kind of in an MVP2 approach. There are a couple things here as we familiarize ourselves with the widget configuration screen. First of all, Zach picked a link widget type, allowing you to link to another third-party solution or whatever you need to link to. There's also an HTML option. And then here on the TypeScript, this is where the TypeScript tab, this is where you'll actually go ahead and code your button, your widget. And there's a lot of great features built in to kind of help with that process. And similarly, in terms of the format that you use, you can go ahead on our CSS tab here and determine how this widget looks, right? What color is it going to be, like Zach's selecting here, indicating that it'll be red, font size, that sort of thing there on the CSS tab. Then here on kind of the help tab, we have an example for each of our widget types. So here is a built-in example for our link widget. If you selected HTML, you would have a help guide for that particular widget type, just kind of giving you a formatting sense and letting you know some of the options that you have available. And then finally, within the configuration window, we have a theme, right? So if you prefer working in light mode, shout out Carl, or if you prefer working in dark mode, you can switch back and forth between them here. So kind of familiarizing ourselves with the page where you actually go to configure widgets, that's what we're going to be looking at here. And over the next few minutes, Zach is going to go ahead and first of all, show us some tips, right? So we can see some definition options here. As we go in, we'll also see our IntelliSense feature, right? So if you're maybe not exactly sure how to do a destroy function, for instance, you can go ahead and type in function or FUNC and kind of get some suggestions there with IntelliSense, really just guiding you through the extensibility process and creating that widget. And so with that kind of familiarity under our belt, I'm going to kind of speak to a few things here while Zach does a couple other items kind of setting up this widget. First of all, as we look ahead, what Zach is going to do first is he's going to create 2 buttons at the top of the work order edit panel within Respond. Now these buttons are going to accomplish a number of things. First of all, they're going to pull some asset information from the asset tab so that they can be displayed in a more prominent location, along with a gray background, some red text, and some hover mechanics that really, really look nice. Second, Zach is going to scrape the asset ID value and insert in this example, it's a dummy URL, but could be some other third-party solution that extends the Cityworks options, right? So Zach will just put in, I think it's just like a test URL, and when he hovers over the button, when we jump back into Respond, you'll see that the link would guide you to this third-party application. So we can scrape the asset ID, which is critical to pass that to a third-party solution. We can determine what the button looks like. We can also determine where it displays within the HTML5 application. So this is a little bit over my head what Zach is doing here, right? But that's the beauty of this demo, which you can, again, access on My Cityworks, and also the documentation that we're putting together and the IntelliSense. The idea is if you're familiar at all with coding, you can jump right in and kind of create these buttons in a really easy to use format. So Zach's going to set up those buttons at the top of a work order edit panel. And while he's doing that, I just also want to speak to some of the initial capabilities of the extensibility model, particularly where you can add widgets. You can add widgets to the edit page of all our AMS activities, so our service requests, our work orders, and our inspections. And you can also add widgets to the attachments panel on a PLL case. And that'll be Zach's second example, kind of showing how you could potentially integrate with a third-party document management system. Now, that's not to say those are the only pages that will ever be available with extensibility. Those are the first pages that it's available within. And we want that to apply to all our layouts throughout Respond and also all of our layouts throughout our HTML5 applications. But to get started, that's what we have available here. And so Zach is just continuing coding here, right? You can see that he's grabbing the entities within kind of the brackets there, right? So he's going to display the entity type, and he's going to put that in the top of this button. He's going to have kind of a complete and incomplete indicator to see if this work on this asset has been complete or not. And here what Zach's typing in right now is that dummy URL, right? So this is really the core of the extensibility model. Zach's just going to point to demo/asset, which isn't a URL that exists, but for your unique environments, you would put in the URL to that third-party system, and then we'll see exactly where you'd click to launch you into that system with all the great Cityworks information. And so Zach's is going to continue here, kind of walking through this, and then within the CSS tab, once Zach is completed here, we're really going to see a lot of options for what this will look like for an end user. We have a lot of great color selection tools. You can modify the font size. You can introduce some hover techniques. So what we'll see eventually when we get back into Respond, Zach's going to have 2 different assets available at the top of his work order edit page. And when he hovers over one with his mouse, it will be a different shade of gray than if it's inactive, right? If he's not hovering over it. So we have a lot of flexibility with not only what these widgets can do, but how they can look and appear to the end user. And so, right, Zach just adding in a few more options here. If the element is undefined, right, return a false. So just kind of some back-end stuff that makes sense from a coding perspective. And really, this is all going to be almost hidden from the end user, right? They're going to just see a button that's really great for them to use. And this is where we're determining exactly what that button does. And then here within CSS, Zach is going to do some of that stuff I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that I really like that he'll get to is when he's indicating the color of these buttons, you can either use the color code, right? If you know the numeric code for a particular color that you want to work with, by all means, you can enter that. Or you can actually click on the little box, right? So Zach has gray in there. You can actually click on that and we'll open up a little color wheel. So you can just kind of, eyeball it, right? See what might work for this particular button in this particular widget. You can set up your font here, which Zach is doing. You can set up your wrappers so that the text doesn't bleed over into other panels and it kind of wraps and fits within the button. And then there's that color wheel, right? So if you just want a little bit lighter of a gray to pop against that background, you can open that up and kind of move your wheel accordingly to pick. And also, as we see to the right for the RGB code, you could enter all those numeric values if you knew the exact color that you wanted to work with. And if we think about this from an end user perspective, right, this is just one of many examples that are possible with the extensibility model. Not only will this link you to a third-party solution and really kind of extend the Cityworks solution, but it will also really make things easier for the end user. They don't need to scroll to the assets panel anymore, right? Here, Zach jumps into his work order, and those two gray lines at the top, that's exactly what Zach just wrote. And so we can see his hover technique there as the gray tone changes. He's showing us that he's pulling the pressurized main and those asset values based on that asset ID that he used. And right here is really the cream of the crop, right? If I click this view button, you can see in the bottom left there that we're pointing to that demo URL that Zach set up. So in theory, I click that button and I'm launched into that third-party solution, and I can link right back and forth within Cityworks, passing that information along. And it's really convenient for the end user, just like our style components, right? Where I can drag and drop that wherever I might need it for my end user. And so another example that we're going to talk about here, I mentioned earlier, and this speaks to really one of the big drivers of the general adoption of the extensibility model, which is linking and passing information between a PLL case and a document management system. So for a lot of our PLL customers, they manage their documents more than what we do in Cityworks. Right here in Cityworks, we have just a few attachments that Zach added, but maybe they use one of our partner solutions to actually mark up those plans. Maybe they need to look at as-built and get feedback from the review staff to interact with contractors. And so within Cityworks currently, they don't really have that functionality. In Office, you could link to one of those partners and kind of really extend the solution and make it complete. So we wanted to add that to the HTML5 apps. So what we're going to do here is we are going to add a button that would launch us into one of those document management systems. And this will appear on the attachments panel. And Zach's going to do a few similar things, right? He's going to create a link here that, again, in this example, just points to that dummy URL, but in theory could launch you to a partner site. He's going to make a nice big delete button, right? As we think about usability and some of the possibilities within the extensibility model, Zach's going to make a really nice, big, clear delete button. So maybe if you're getting feedback from users who are out in the field that the delete button within Respond, the little trash can button, just isn't big enough for them or something else along those lines, you can go ahead and create your own buttons to kind of achieve the same functionality, but really allow your end users to have a better experience. So what Zach's doing, and what he has highlighted here, is he's going to pull the attachment ID, that RelDocs ID, the CA object ID, so our unique identifier for our PLL case. And he's also going to pass along that URL. So just showing that you can scrape those values here from within a PLL case and pass them to that document management system, right? So if you're using a document management system and you want to review a specific set of plans, you can click a button tied to that set of plans, and instead of seeing all the documents you've ever associated with that project, you can see that exact plan document and carry through that with reference to the Cityworks activity. And this is kind of some of the coding that Zach's going to launch here, right? He speeds this one up. But again, you can see the IntelliSense flashing through, so we can get a sense of, the formatting there and kind of the tools that we have to allow you to ensure that you're coding this correctly, right? And he's also going to grab the file name. He's going to make that nice big delete button, and he's going to create a link that will launch you to that third-party application for your document management system. He's going to go into the CSS, so we can see some of this again, right? He's determining the width and height of the button and the font. It's going to be red, right, with some of that green option, depending on certain variables within that attachment, right? And so now Zach's going to refresh respond after he saves this to the style profile, right? So that's another benefit, is this is profile specific. And now we can see those nice big delete buttons. So if you have users who maybe don't like going to the 3 dots button to hit the trash icon, you can make your own delete buttons now with the extensibility model. And then there's also that export option that Zach just created, as we can see at the bottom of this little pop-up. And when you would select that export button, you would pass along this information to the document management system, and you'd be able to interact with that and extend the Cityworks solution to really cover all your permitting needs. And again, just kind of speaking to the style profile, right? Maybe for some of your users, it makes sense to have these big delete buttons, right? They're out in the truck and they don't like to go to the 3 dots and hit the little trash can. So for those folks, your field crew, give them a big button. But for your internal staff, maybe you don't want to have that option, and you have that flexibility because these widgets are built and specific to your style profile. So let me jump ahead here. Go to my next slide. Maybe. There we go. So some of the benefits within this initial iteration of the extensibility model, right? For our asset example, we have less clicks, less scrolling if you want to place those buttons in a more prominent location for your user. We can tie in with those third-party solutions, and we also have that increased flexibility. And kind of what's next, right? As we think about further iterations, we want to increase the available layouts for this model. Right now, we're tied to those edit pages on our 3 AMS activities and the attachments panel on a PLL case. The goal is to have this available throughout our entire suite at some point, right? And that's going to be coming in the future. And then also, I spoke to the ability to pass along the work order ID, or I should say the work activity ID, whether that's your inspection, service request, work order, or PLL case, and also being able to scrape the asset information. We want to be able to extend that so you can pass along really almost anything that you'd need to pass along for those third-party solutions. And so we're actively working on this, but we think this lays a great foundation and is going to be a really, really useful and beneficial piece of functionality for everybody right now. It's available within 15.8 and Respond 4.0, and we're really excited about it.
Now we're going to turn it over to a different area of the platform. And so today we started out with, discussing our roadmap, our priorities. And if you recall, being the GIS-centric solution is the anchoring priority, right? And so by investing in our platform, innovation and new capabilities is possible. And part of that, or actually the epitome of that, is really with what the latest GIS features are. And so part of that, Carl's going to cover that today as our GIS subject matter expert. So I'm going to turn it over to Carl.
Thank you, Denora. I am super excited to kind of show off what we have available in the upcoming release. Oh, and I had gone back a little bit too far. But anyways, and so we've been working really hard. Dev's been working really hard. We've had a lot of conversations with Esri and with staff, to see what their needs are, industry trends. And so a couple things that we have really focused on over the past year has been 3D. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about 3D configuration, some of the widgets that we have available, support for subtypes as it relates to the utility network, but just subtypes in general as well. If you aren't a utility, you can still take advantage of that, and then kind of wrap up with some of the new widgets, tools, and functionalities that we have available in the map. So just a high level over of 3D and how it works, and you can utilize it in Cityworks. And so we are using an ArcGIS scene. So as long as you have ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Portal, you can create your scene and be able to bring that in and utilize that in Cityworks, just like you would a web map. And we understand completely that you don't want to do one or the other. So we have the ability now, and we'll show that, of switching between 2D and 3D, based on needs, workflows, and user preference. Being able to interact with that pan, zoom, tilt, kind of glide around like you would in an ArcGIS scene viewer, utilize a majority of the map tools that are available in 3D, plus a couple of added ones. go through your normal workflow of viewing, creating work activities, and then also being able to use that 3D scene in other locations like a dashboard. So here I opened up a scene, added some buildings, some trees, changed the symbology, did some labeling for some fields for parks. And as you see there, I saved it, and I have up in the top here that web scene. And so I'll copy that, and I will go into admin, GIS services, and I will add this web scene with that scene ID just like I would say a web map. And we'll go ahead and add that to our services resources here in admin. Then I'll open up my service definitions and go to my existing one for this parks and recreation example where I have this web map, and actually just add another map service here. So here I have my scene and I have my web map. And we can add more than just this, but just for the example here, we have the two available. And so now, once you do that, then you will have this widget, this service switcher widget here. So here I'm panning around my 2D map. As you can see, I see my assets, have my event layers, just like you normally would. And if we needed some 3D perspective, want to start changing that around and get that 3D view, now we can open up and actually switch between that scene. And so here I have my scene. I can pan around just like you would with the 2D, but we can also go ahead and start tilting and viewing to really get that 3D perspective. You know, this is a parks example, but you could use this when, you know, across all your disciplines of your organizations. I can open up my work activities just like I would in 2D and really start to interact and view what we're doing here in 3D, you know, what you can do in 2D. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of the other map tools and how they interact. So I'm not going to show everything here today, but please go ahead and kind of put those in there and look. So I'm going to select these 5 trees here. As you can see, I can select them. They interact just like they would with 2D. You can view the details, create the work orders off of those. Editing. So we'll go ahead and show an example here of editing in 2D or in 3D. So I'll create a tree point here and just click on that. And I have my symbology for all these trees based off of this common name. So I'm going to click the common name, and that's going to change the symbology. And then I have my elevation extruded based on the diameter. So I can change that diameter here to 48 and pan around and zoom around. These are just examples. But you could do, you know, different fields based on how that is configured in that web scene. And so you can pan around and see what that tree may look like. You added buildings, other 3D features as well. Bookmarks, same bookmarks you have in 2D, you can utilize here in 3D. So I have a bookmark here to City Hall. So if you're doing presentations or you're needing to see different areas, you can go ahead and view those as well. So that's just a couple of examples, but the create activity tool, locate, legend, redline, all these other widgets are work in 3D just like they would in 2D. A new widget that is available in 3D is going to be the daylight widget. So here I've added a water tank from Google SketchUp, added it to Pro to my scene, you know, to get an idea of what a new water tank might look in this location. I got the 3D measurement there to show that it is roughly 100 feet. And now I want to see in my area, you know, what the shadow analysis is going to look like for this tank, if this is where we place that. So I can kind of do that manually here, or I can hit the play button, you know, for that day, you know, being able to kind of look around, pan around and see, you know, what time of the day, what the shadow is going to look like, who can see that, and if it's going to affect anybody throughout the day. So you could go there, and that's just for the current date for the video, but we could go ahead and change that date below as well and really be able to show, you know, how this example for a water tank would affect user or customers, citizens in this area. And so here I'm just panning around, and this is some different data. So what we had initially showed was mostly vector data. So this is a 3D texture mesh from partner Nearmap, and this is for an entire city. And so that can be easily added, stored in your organization. This is stored in ArcGIS Online, and added to a scene, added here in the Cityworks. And then on top of that, you could add any of your vector data that you wanted to do, say water mains, or different assets, streets, sidewalks, and being able to really get that view and being able to really start to see and utilize like big, massive pieces of data, very quickly, and share those out to the different divisions, different departments, in your organization. And then the last example, I want to quickly show is when we're talking about 3D, we're getting a lot of feedback about vertical assets. So here, this is our Trimble Westminster office in Colorado, and it is brought in here in 3D. It is from a BIM file, so you can see the BIM shell on the outside, but it's also floor aware, and so it interacts with the floor filter widget. So in Respond 3.4, we added, out of the box, the floor filter widget that will interact with floor aware data. So it's 2D and 3D. So for anybody that has indoors or looking at indoors, you can see how we're zooming in and actually interacting with the tool on the right here. And we'll change the building, zoom in, being able to get really good detail, for your vertical assets. As you look at, maybe taking these from that 2D related type of asset structure, and really start to make that vertical jump into the 3D. So let me go back one, sorry. So next item we're going to talk about is subtypes. So for people that don't know what subtypes are, they're just a set of features that share the same attribute, and they have been around for a long time, but they have kind of make this really big comeback with the utility network as far as asset groups and asset types. And so for an example of a street subtype, could be a street subtype with one feature where you may have residential, arterial, and highways. UN example would be a water line feature that may have, your service lines, your main lines, as far as the subtypes, and they could even go in further with like your water main lines may have transmission and distribution lines. And so there's a lot of benefits for organizations to start to use subtypes. So better data integrity, since you are providing other fields with correct attribute information, default values, you will get less issues, mistakes, so better QA/QC. Performance, especially when you're utilizing web maps and pulling in these web services, you may just have that one feature service that you're utilizing versus maybe 5 or 6 that you're having to call back at the server all the time. And then easy use for end users. So it's that one feature, turn it on and off, see that instead of maybe having a huge map with 20 or 30 services, you may be able to slim that down to 5 or 6. So in admin, we now have this new, under the GIS, import GIS service assets, that's going to allow you to work with your subtypes and your domains. So here I have a water main map, or a UN map service. I'm going to choose my water lines, and I'll click load subtypes. And this is going to load all the subtypes that are available for this asset. We'll pick our domains. And for the example here, I'll click on my services. And as you can see, as that service subtype there. And then if I want to go further, I can go ahead and click on my asset type, change my residential service. So it is going to allow you to get really granular with how you want to manage your assets and your work activities that are associated with that asset. So here I just have, just down to that asset group, asset type. But if you wanted to do diameter, or you wanted to use your material, you could do this here as well. So And the really good part about this is it's using your subtypes, it's using your domains. So here I have this, we'll go in here and look at that. You know, here's that commercial residential. So it is going to be configured, set up your UIDs, display fields here. Actually look into our service layers and you can get an idea of what that looks like. So here's my service and my asset type and my asset groups. You know, that has now been added in admin 2.0. So you can really get a good idea and start to get really granular, you know, if you want to. So we'll open this up, and this is just an example here of some water UN data. And we'll look at the legend, and we'll scroll down really quickly. But as you can see, you know, I just have a couple of actual feature services in there, and one is the water lines one. And so I'll select this area. And for an end user, it is going to go ahead and select everything. But on the left here, it will break that out into those asset groups and types that we configured. So you can see I have my commercial services that were configured, and now I also have my 20 residential services. So I had selected, you know, more than just the services, but it is just going to show me what is configured. And you can configure that for everything. So that was just the example of showing like, hey, this is how you can configure subtypes and start utilizing those, and a lot of the value that you're going to see on the GIS and the Cityworks side. In the next version, or in Respond 4.0, in the editor tool, we now include editor snapping. So here I will turn my snapping on my water mains and my service lines. And so if we wanted to add a service line with a hydrant, I can go in here, make sure that that data is snapped, and we'll add a service line, could add the asset identifiers, update the attributions there as well. And then we'll add a hydrant onto this service line here. And as you can see, it is snapped. So to really help with the connectivity, quality of your GIS data, you know, as you start allowing users, if you're not already, to edit the data, this is just that extra step to make sure that your data quality continues to be up to where it needs to be. We have also added project information onto the create activity through the map. So a user could select, for this example, water mains that need to be repaired as part of a capital project. So we have these water mains here selected. You can put in and change that to a repair or replace, and then choose the project that's that you want to associate with those assets. And so here we've created all these work orders. Now we're going to go over to OpEx and open up that project. So we have that CIP project that we associated those work activities to. We can go ahead and open that up, and we see the work orders associated with those. We also see the assets that we selected there as well. And if we have some of the costing information, you know, configured, you know, estimated cost, we can see all that rolled in as one as well. So it really streamlines, you know, those projects and that workflow. A few other updates to Respond as well. Coordinate conversion tool from 3x to 4x has several options, you know, more options, different coordinates types, but you can also copy and paste and actually, you know, just paste those into and input the coordinates and zoom to those. Split line tool is available in Respond 4.0. And then lastly, grouping event layers. So in 3.4, if you check the box for clustering, your clustered event layers. Now, if you check the box for grouping event layers, they will be grouped in Respond. As you can see, work order, inspections, service requests, but we also have the options now to actually make those visible at that level. So in 3x, you could just turn them on one at a time. If you had, say, 20 work order event layers, you could turn those all on and off at one time. So thank you. I know it's a lot, but we're really excited, you know, to see what everybody does, you know, with a lot of this new functionality, you know, coming up that's released in 15.8 and, you know, the releases to come.
Thanks to our product management team as well as Robert and Adam. And thank you for your participation. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to your CSMs or your sales team, and we'd be happy to get back with you, and we'll try and answer all of these questions that came in today.